In terms of the 10 to 10K BTC wallets, now we're looking on-chain. This is kind of the big smart money tier that owns about 2/3 of all Bitcoin. They jumped from 13.57 million to 13.61 million in just 24 hours.
Hey everybody, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and joining me is Brian from Sentiment. And as you all know, we are going to do a deep dive into the metrics around Bitcoin and the top altcoins, XRP, Ethereum, Solana, and much more, because it's exciting times. Bitcoin was rallying, hit new all-time highs. Brian, how are you feeling about the moves that took place over the past couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, overall, it's been great, right? I think everyone is finally excited to see the stagnation period where it was stuck between, 105 to 110 for all that time, finally end and have us move past that big historical milestone of 112K that we were at back in mid-May. And here we are seeing new heights and kind of exploring new territory now. And even though, the latest move has been a bit of a pullback, if you bought in anywhere between a week ago to forever ago before that, you're pretty happy right now because you're up money. So lots to get into, and we've seen some crazy stuff on the sentiment side, as you would imagine.
Yeah, and when you said about depending on if you bought right and the lows, and you would be up really nice. Now, I remember us talking through the tariff crash and looking at what whales were doing and the accumulation. If you bought at 70-something thousand when it crashed, you're pretty good right now. Not to mention the long-term holders who have bought at much lower prices.
Yeah, as usual, I mean, the biggest winners are the holders, the people that are just kind of stocking Satoshis away and letting prices do what they need to do for long periods of time, while the people who lose are the ones who are trying to overreact to every piece of news, swing trade too far when they don't need to, especially like the tariffs being the most recent example, or even the Israel-US airstrikes that happened about 3-4 weeks ago now. A lot of people lost money there where they oversold because of that news. And then we quickly recovered and have seen something like a 25% jump or so since we were in that concerning zone where we might have been falling below 100K. So actually, no, we did fall below 100, and people kept panic selling, and they're now kicking themselves.
Oh yeah, a lot of people were calling for the end of the bull market, saying we were in a bear market. They panic sold. You guys are idiots. This thing is over, right? Because they're so caught up in the media narratives and what's happening versus the fundamentals of what's happening on the charts and the on-chain data and much more. So with that said, let's look at Bitcoin as far as sentiment, how people are feeling.
So I'm going to start off by showing this. This is a quick comparison of the social dominance, so the percentage of discussions related to layer ones here in green, layer twos here in purple, and then meme coins here in pink. And as you would expect, because of Bitcoin, we've gone through the roof with over half of all discussions alone related to the top 6 layer ones out there. Obviously, the vast majority of that being associated with Bitcoin. Meanwhile, meme coins kind of had their run back about 10 days ago. They've fallen off a bit. Layer twos, Ethereum especially, like in late June, they were having quite a run. So they were getting some discussion, but they've fallen back down. Overall, it's very, very heavily weighted toward Bitcoin. And as I transition over, we can look at the ratio of positive versus negative commentary across social media. And here we can actually see that, the most positive we got was actually back on July 9th. And it wasn't until the expectations kind of dropped among retail traders that we ended up going for that huge skyrocketing green candle where we eventually got up to 123.1K. And as you can see, the sentiment is actually continuing to go lower due to all of the disbelief. People who think this is just a fluke, some sort of bull trap going on. There's too many things going on with the tariffs and ongoing conflicts across the world for this to last too long. Of course, we've got some FOMC decisions coming up too, so people might be bracing themselves for that. But either way, yeah, we're clearly seeing that there is a downturn in sentiment despite prices going up, which is kind of rare, but it's indicative of the jadedness that the crowd has been kind of exhibiting.
Yeah, that's a good word, a good way to phrase it. The jadedness, right? They're so jaded by all the things we've experienced. And I get it, but you always have to balance the narratives and all those things out there with what's happening on the chart. And clearly Bitcoin broke out to new highs. And what's happening right now is a simple back test of support levels because it got overheated, right? The RSI was in the overbought zone. We were in extreme greed. And as we've, talked about it ad nauseum, we've seen the cyclical pattern, right? The fear and greed and how the price follows that.
Exactly. Looking at the RSI too, just since you mentioned that, it got up to above 75, which is definitely a danger zone in most cases, no matter what asset you're looking at. Even the previous couple of times, same thing. We saw a retrace right after those occurrences happened. So both technical and social indicators were indicating, if this wasn't the top, we were getting very close to it. And sure enough, we turned around right after it happened. So my opinion is the greed happened, but it was very short term. And we quickly corrected back down. And now people are kind of in this mode like, is it even worth it? Should we wait until we go back to 110? And I think it's an interesting point right now because we'll look at the whales in a moment because they've got their own agendas at the moment. But right now, retail really seems to be confused. Like they just have no pulse at all on which direction crypto is going to go. Anytime we hear about tariffs, we expect it to go down, and it just goes on a huge surge instead. Big conflicts going on in the Middle East, doesn't matter, price goes up. So overall, I think that this is overall a pretty good thing. When the crowd is not in this locked in mindset that we're going to go up and up and up forever because they're jaded or whatever the case is, generally this is good for the rest of at least the next few months, if not the rest of the year. Of course, many things can get thrown into that to change the course of the direction. But retail sentiment is not standing in the way of potentially a 130 to 150K Bitcoin price in the near future.
Yeah, well put. And it's what we talked a lot about, going against the herd, being a contrarian against the herd. And smart money is always a contrarian against the herd. If the herd, majority of retail, some people call them dumb money, right? If they are bullish, that's a time to be fearful. If they are fearful, that's a time to be bullish. And it's so funny how this plays out.
Exactly. Yeah. And skipping ahead right now, why don't we look at the ETFs for just a moment? Make sure it's all refreshed and up to date. Look at all this money coming in. I mean, any bar that's above the zero axis means there's more inflowing money than outflowing money. We've literally only had 1 day of money moving out more than moving in. That was on July 1st. The date is actually 1 day behind because of my time zone. But it appears that we're just getting way more money moving in over time. In fact, these 2 days, which were actually July 10th and 11th, they were the two biggest days we've seen since January 17th. In fact, 1.008 versus 1.046. So this one here, which was on July 10th, literally the biggest inflow day since the day after Trump was elected. So clearly there's some serious money moving into ETFs right now, and it would be, silly to ignore this and its impact on the way prices have been moving.
Absolutely. I mean, I look at this chart, it's incredible. That's a lot of accumulation. And we're seeing also the Ethereum ETFs are getting a lot of inflow. So I think a lot of the smart money, while retail is still confused, they're loading up and putting their clients' money in it and looking for higher prices.
The institutionals will salivate over these kinds of moments where the retailers are kind of sitting like, deer in the headlights, not knowing what to do. So when we kind of see this analysis paralysis going on among retail, it's generally the time where institutionals can do their thing without a lot of resistance, not a lot of group sell walls or buy walls, and they can kind of wreak havoc. And you can see what they did in terms of the 10 to 10K BTC wallets. Now we're looking on chain. This is kind of the big smart money tier that owns about 2/3 of all Bitcoin. They jumped from 13.57 million to 13.61 million in just 24 hours. About $34,500. I'm sorry, 34.5K Bitcoin accumulated in just that 24-hour stretch. And it's especially a good sign because it's happened between the time that the all-time high happened and the time we've retraced. So they've used this opportunity during this mild retrace, and it is mild, by the way. 123K down to 117K is not as big of a drop as like 70K to 64K percentage-wise. And I think sometimes people think that same $6,000 interval is the same drop, but the higher the price gets mathematically, the less these $1,000 differences matter when you think about it. So it's not a big price drop. It literally was only about 2.2%. But during that time, institutionals, the key smart money tier, added 35K more, give or take, Bitcoin. And that's a massive jump, as you can see.
Wow. Talk about dip buying. I mean,
yeah.
You look at that chart, and again, the juxtaposition of retail confused, people thinking this is a bull trap, and whatever else narrative that's out there, right? And institutional money via the ETFs, as well as just on-chain data here, just showing the accumulation that's happening.
Exactly. And the last all-time high we had, for those who remember, it was just under 2 months ago, May 22nd or 21st, depending on your time zone. We retraced, and then about 5 days after that, we saw this enormous accumulation where they added about 100,000 Bitcoin over the next week or so. This time, it looks like it's happening instantaneously, like literally within a day after it started to retrace from it, they just couldn't help themselves and started scooping up more Bitcoin right away instead of this delay like we saw in the last one.
I'm sure many of them had like limit orders or bots or whatever ready to buy, right?
Yeah. 120K buys all around, waiting for it to drop back down. And probably as soon as it did, they just filled.
Wow. Incredible. What's the MVRV looking like for Bitcoin?
Yeah. So we'll look at Bitcoin as well as Ethereum here, because I think Ethereum will be telling. I think altcoins in general, people are now kind of waiting for them to catch up, because that's been the pattern. Mm-hmm. Anytime Bitcoin goes on this huge solo run. So 30-day MVRV shows we're just under plus 9%. Definitely a little bit scary to see it up that high. Anything above 0% means there's more risk than usual. So we call danger zone areas usually right around plus 15%. We haven't really seen that all year long. And that's been part of the reason we've continued to see such good price performances. But yeah, plus 9% or plus 8.8, whatever the exact number is, this definitely says that you'd be buying when there's more risk than usual, especially when you include the long-term MVRV, which is at about plus 25% here. Both of them are indicative of some danger zone showing. It doesn't mean the rally's over right now. We've seen times where the MVRVs have gone well above where they are right now before correcting here too on the last all-time high. But I would approach Bitcoin with caution right now. Dollar cost averaging might be a more wise way to go if you're worried about buying and having the price just drop off a cliff right after you do, which I know many people feel like the prices are out to get them sometimes, and DCA is a great way to counter that.
Yeah, I think to your point, to add to what you said, your time horizon is also important. Are you looking for short-term gains that might be very risky? But if you're holding hey, I'm going to wait for the next 5 months, right? This could pay off well, but it is risky. You may want to wait to Bitcoin to pull back a bit more or complete this local top move, which I think it is. No guarantees, of course. And then maybe the continuation that happens in late Q3, Q4.
Totally. Time in the market always beats timing of the markets, as they say. So
absolutely. You mentioned Ethereum.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about ETH, man, because you got a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but you got some big Ethereum treasury companies in play. ETH has been on the move. Its chart is looking bullish.
Yeah, it's actually outpaced Bitcoin by a bit. Going back to the dip on June 22nd, it's up pretty massively, a little over plus 33% during that time. MVRV, especially on the short term, is much higher than Bitcoin. It's literally at about that danger zone that I drew here, plus 14.7%. I said plus 15 is kind of a rule of thumb, where if it goes over that, watch out, just like it did back here. This was a great time to sell. Doesn't always mean it's going to be the perfect time to sell. So if you get angry that prices keep going up, if you sell right now, based on this video, which we're not giving that advice for you to do, but to each their own, just understand that if it keeps going up, anomalies do happen. It just means with each passing percent where it keeps going higher than zero, there's more and more risk to own that coin until things cool down. So the 30-day MVRV short term is actually at more risk than Bitcoin right now, but long term, it's at less risk than Bitcoin, interestingly, at just about 12.5%. So just like you said, Tony, time frame matters a lot. If your investment strategy is to hold Ethereum for a year or more, it might actually be a better bet than Bitcoin, according to this, if you believe in Ethereum. If not, if you're looking for a quick 2-week swing trade, there probably are better options than Ethereum right now, due to just the fact that the average wallets out there have profited so heavily.
Very interesting. It's this is like a chart that I need to make sure I bookmark, because this is so fascinating, to give you an idea of how overheated an asset is, or if it's cooled down and it's a good opportunity to get in. Obviously, you want to look at multiple factors, but this is very, very interesting.
Totally. If you're just looking for a quick way to understand, am I buying low? Am I selling high? It's not possible to do if you're looking at the all-time chart for Ethereum. Like, here's all of Ethereum's public trading for the last 10 years or so. How are you going to tell what the high and low is based on this? Well, you really should be assessing it based on average returns of your other traders that you're competing with. We're not all in this together. It may seem like everyone's bullish on X, but there's people rooting against the price all the time that are actively trying to make the price go lower as you're rooting for it to go higher. So just keep in mind that MVRV is an awesome resource to help with that.
Can we look at sentiment around Ethereum? I'm curious how people are they very bullish right now? What are they saying?
So Ethereum, let's get out of the past 10 years. We don't need that. We'll just look at the last 3 months. Yeah, huge bullish spike today. Interesting. So this is actually the second biggest Euphoria spike we've seen in the past 3 months, probably even throughout 2025. Here's the full last year. It's a little noisy this way, but yeah, second highest of 2025 right now today. So clearly there's a lot of people that are very bullish on ETH. It isn't particularly breaking out more than the average altcoin right now, but I think there's just a lot of positive news. As you mentioned, the ETFs are looking really good there. So it's clear that retailers, now that they've seen the Bitcoin all-time high, might be eyeing Ethereum, to get back over 4K in the next month or so.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then there's also been the treasury companies. You got like Tom Lee, guys like that, who's saying, ETH is better than Bitcoin. We're using it as a corporate treasury strategy, or corporate treasury asset. It's so then there's a big narrative out there, but it looks like the sentiment's getting a little too overheated here, and the MVRV is showing that things are a little bit overheated.
Yeah, again, this doesn't mean this is a bad investment or anything. Ethereum is Ethereum, and it's been a very reliable mainstay among people's portfolios for a decade. But for swing trading or finding that ideal entry point, you'd rather be buying in when sentiment is in the dumpster and retailers are just writing it off, kind of like what we saw throughout 2024 when everyone was kind of laughing at Ethereum for being such an underperformer compared to Bitcoin or even XRP or Cardano or a lot of these other altcoins that were all going on runs, and Ethereum was stuck in the mud. Those are the ideal times where you should be looking to buy or add on to your investment for these coins that you know are getting worked on all the time and have an active team behind them. But for some reason, whether it's price or something else, retailers are just writing it off and trying to sell it however they possibly can. That's when you should be buying.
Yeah, well put. Let's jump to XRP. What are you seeing there from a sentiment standpoint? And then if we can look at the MVRV there as well.
So XRP has actually been pretty under the radar for a while. It doesn't look like there's crazy euphoria toward it, even though the price has obviously exploded. It's been almost as big of a topic as Bitcoin's all-time high. But of course, the mainstream is the media is going to latch on to Bitcoin's all-time high and overshadow XRP, even when it goes on like this week-long 32-ish% jump between the 7th and the 14th. It's retraced just a tiny bit, but yeah, it did manage to get over $3. We actually posted about the fact that $3 was a big key point to watch, where once it went over, it would likely have a lot of people trying to fill sell orders. And I think that's kind of what happened. So now we're on that second wave where the big test will be whether it can make a higher high, which means exactly how it sounds for those unfamiliar in TA trading. You're looking to see if this second jump, now that we've retraced a little, will actually end up higher than this price point of whatever it got to, 305 or just below that. You'll see a big test there. And if it goes over, that's a good signal that we can keep on going, and maybe 350 is targeted next, so on and so forth.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. We've talked about rotational liquidity, right? Bitcoin steals the show. Then you start to see the large caps, mid caps, small caps eventually move. And then XRP, even though, like you say, it did well, it's kind of getting lost in the mix because there's other coins also doing well. So it's like everybody's, and this is kind of good and bad, because you got like meme coins will start performing really well. And like I saw this morning, Butthole was up 15%. I'm like, come on, man.
There you go. It's always something new. The funnier, the more memeier, the better. So
it's crazy, man. What's the MVRV looking like for XRP?
Yeah, it's up there. It's actually, yeah, this is looking the scariest for the short term, at least, among the three assets we've discussed. So this is that danger zone area, just according to the math. It has nothing to do with mine or Tony's opinions about XRP. I still think it's a great long-term investment if you can hold it for a long time. But after you see a run like this, where XRP just decouples from the rest of the markets and outpaces Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's not a shocker at all to see that the average wallets for short-term traders is at plus 24.5%. Long-term traders, it's way up at plus 47%. And as you can see, both of them collectively have not been this high, at least in the past 3 months. If we go back to a year, I think late 2024, it had that huge run. So it probably got a little bit higher then, if I had to guess. Yeah, it was off the axis back here. But obviously, if you're buying here, you're going to get punished. And if you're buying here as well, same thing. Since this peak where the 30-day MVRV was way up at plus 38%, now it's at plus 24 for reference. The price dropped all the way down over the next 2.5 months. Yeah, it dropped about 42, 45% or so. So you don't want to be buying when the MVRV is way up here, especially off the axis. It's not off the axis now, but both the short and long term are in the danger zones where if you're relying on just robotic math to make your trading decisions, it would be telling you to take some profit here at minimum.
That makes sense. Yeah. And, this kind of, well, I should say, let me back up. I've been sharing with people that, we could see a cool down here in the markets, and maybe over the next week and a half or 2 weeks, things are not looking too great, but it's just building support levels. And then the rally maybe continues late July into early August. And that could, be the correction, so to speak, on this chart where it cools down to a place that's sustainable, then moves up again.
Yeah, I could see if and when the correction happens, it may be a very short one because of the fact that the sentiment, as we just saw, is not too high. XRP has been kind of overshadowed by Bitcoin's all-time high. So the euphoria toward XRP has not been there based on this kind of price trajectory, which would normally imply that you would see a lot of FOMO. So I think if there is a bigger retrace, let's say it goes down below 280, 270 or something again, the sentiment might actually get very negative. People retailers sell their XRP to institutionals who then jack up the price all the way back above $3 and beyond very quickly. So I could see that being a realistic scenario.
Yeah, for sure. Let's look at Solana, the MVRV, as well as sentiment.
So we don't have the MVRV for Solana due to the fact that it's not a fully supported blockchain just yet. We do have a few things like network growth, which I can show, and then I'll show sentiment.
Sure.
And we'll do the same for SUI, Tony, because we talked about that before this call started. Yeah, so Solana's been a little bit stuck in the mud, to be honest. It's not seeing a lot of new wallets created compared to some of its bigger moments, like in late 2024. Its price is doing fine. It's been hanging in there at about 162-ish right now. But on-chain wise, not anything too exciting. Here's the full last year. And we talked about this a little on some previous calls. It's had like a lot of weird bot activity, which I think has created some false noise. When you see 22 bullish comments for every one bearish comment, that tells me there's something weird going on, and like an ulterior motive, maybe not related to the official Solana team, but large innovative groups that have figured out ways to skew the sentiment to be very bullish and bring in as many buyers as possible from the retail side. So that might have been what was going on. If I just like zoom in to the last month instead to get past that bot activity, it does look like it's growing slightly among bullish versus bearish comments. 4.5 bullish comments compared to 1 bearish comment is still pretty high. So there's a lot of belief in Solana. And I would normally call this really high, but we can see that that's kind of the normal. Social media tends to be very fond of Solana and constantly shill it and talk about all of its benefits. And it's associated with a lot of meme coins that have done very well too. So Solana gets a little bit of that positive adjacent bullish feel because of those.
I was about to say, I think some of the bot activity is related to meme coin pumpers, not necessarily, like you said, the Solana team or anything like that, or Solana development folks, but simply people who are pumping those meme coins on like pump.fun, which is all based on Solana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that theory makes a lot of sense.
Interesting.
And then I'll switch over to SUI really quick. SUI's been pretty run of the mill in terms of commentary, despite, I know why you wanted to discuss it, Tony. I mean, the price has been insane. Just in the past week alone, we go back roughly 1 week, it was at around 280, and now it's sitting at 408 for a price gain of roughly 44% 1 week alone. So it's done even better than XRP in that respect. But this sentiment spike really doesn't show anything special going on. When SUI is talked about, it's usually a pretty high bullish versus bearish ratio. But we've seen much more FOMO than what we're seeing right now. So I don't see retail kind of having their greed get in the way of a further rally.
Yeah, this coin has been moving. So this is interesting that even there's not much I don't know. hard to make some sort of conclusion here as to what may be happening.
Yeah, I put out an insight earlier today about just the top trending coins. So right now, if we just look at the coins that are getting the most attention compared to normal, like their resting average versus where they're at now, it's dominated by Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP at the moment. That's not a big surprise. But then we have some weird ones, you know, Pepe, Pengu has been way up there because they've been on a big run. MicroStrategy, they're now holding something like 600 million Bitcoin. If I have that number correct, I think I do. I just read about it this morning. Pump.fun, SBET, and Ample round out the top 10. SBET being Sharplink Gaming, which I'm not as familiar with, but some of you may be.
Oh, so that's one of the Ethereum treasury companies. They put a
Thank
ton.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense then.
Mm.
Yeah, so we always have like little AI explanations of why they're trending, as well as how bullish versus bearish the retail crowd is on it. And you can see SBET in particular has a ton of bullishness. Ample's a little more lukewarm. MicroStrategy, people are even a little bit bearish on. Maybe they don't like the fact. I've seen a lot of people talk about, you know, the fact that they're making Bitcoin so centralized. If anything, God forbid, happens to MicroStrategy, what that could do to Bitcoin and all of cryptocurrency. So I think that's seen some mild backlash. Pepe, Pengu are seeing a little bit of bullishness. PEP is like a layer one with its own blockchain and separate from Pepe, but maybe it's due to the fact that there's a little bit of confusion around it. Here it gives an explanation of why people are bearish about PEP for what it's worth, but you can check this out on your own just by going to our social trends dashboard. I know we don't want to spend too much time talking about meme coins, but yeah, I mean, clearly XRPs, you know, their ProShares leveraged XRP futures ETF on the New York Stock Exchange played a big part in this recent run. And then Ethereum being kind of mildly bullish, Bitcoin being as pretty much as neutral as you can get, just like our sentiment charts were showing, Tony. I find that to be maybe the most interesting story. The fact that we're literally in that all-time high range still, but people are kind of just shrugging and saying, okay, didn't expect it, but now we're here, probably just going to come back down. That seems to be the common narrative.
I don't know if you've ever seen the Wall Street cheat sheet, Psychology of Markets, and there's a disbelief zone, right? The disbelief. Oh, yeah. Well, this is we don't believe it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, good stuff, Brian. I'm hoping by the next time we meet in a couple of weeks that maybe we're seeing 130K Bitcoin, 140K Bitcoin, and ETH maybe near 4, XRP a bit higher as well. We'll see. You know, no guarantees, but it's exciting times, man. This is what we've been waiting for.
Especially with the fact whales are continuing to buy right now. That's a pretty good sign. Just on that 24-hour dip, they add 40,000 or 35,000 Bitcoin. I like the sign of that.
Yeah, man, that's insane. All right, thank you so much, Brian. Good stuff, and I'm really excited for our next interview that we're gonna do, because I'm anticipating things are gonna get even more euphoric.
Absolutely, man. I'm looking forward to catching up more, and take care in the meantime.